Hello, this is Sinta Ebersohn from Fair Divorce, and today is actually Youth Day in South Africa. And I'm glad that we are going to be discussing a lot of matters around divorce that actually affects children in a big way. And we're also doing this in preparation of celebrating Global Fair Divorce Day, which is on the 25th of June. And with me here today is retired judge Philip Marcus, who's going to speak to us about his experience and his perspectives on what a fair divorce should be or could be. Welcome and thank you for being here again.
Thank you, Sinta. It's a pleasure to be here.
Please tell us, in your experience as a retired family court judge in Jerusalem, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct. What
have you experienced? How are divorces in general? Can we declare them fair or not fair? And what would we have to do? How would it have to happen to make a divorce a fair process?
All right, those are big questions. I practiced family law in England before I moved to Israel. I then practiced family law as a lawyer for 15 years. I spent 17 years in the family court. And since I took early retirement 9 years ago, I've been studying and working on the topic, not representing parties, but researching and seeing what are best practices here and around the world. There are a number of issues as to whether divorces are fair or not. Fair, of course, is in the eye of the beholder. One person may feel fine that that person is satisfied with the result, and the other person may be extremely unsatisfied with the result. So that using the word fair is a little unfair, if I may say so. I think the focus should be on how couples who decide they're going to separate should properly organize things in the interests of their children. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Parents' Promise. This is a relatively new project. I will, if you give me permission, can I share screen and put up the Parents' Promise? Is that possible?
Please do that.
Okay, let me see if I've got it in an appropriate place. Hold on. All right, let me just tell you about it while I'm looking for it on my screen. The Parents' Promise is a document which is intended to be signed by both parents, and it's addressed to the child. And it says to the child how, if it should happen that the parents are going to separate, then how they promise to conduct matters. The important thing is that it's addressed to the child. In other words, the parents are binding themselves to recognize the needs of the child as being paramount when they decide to separate or get divorced. That, of course, depends on the parents being made aware in advance of the fact that parental separation is not just a matter between them. I see I'm having trouble finding the slide. All right, not the end of the world. The parents, in fact, couples who decide to have children, should be made aware from the very outset that if they do have children, they have responsibilities to the children. And these responsibilities subsist whether or not they're living together, whether or not they're married, whether or not they're divorced or separated. And so one of the ways that I'm trying to advance to prevent children from suffering when the parents get divorced is a program of really information for parents as to what happens to children when the parents separate or get divorced. And even in the best circumstances, the child experiences a tremendous shock. The child goes through a period of terrible uncertainty. It can range from, where am I going to live? If mommy and daddy are living separately, where am I going to live? Or am I going to live with both of them at different times? If I have to move away from my home and from my school and from my friends, what's going to happen to me?
Yes.
Will I still have contact with my grandparents and my uncles and aunts and with my friends? We've spoken in a previous discussion about parental alienation,
Yes.
which cuts the child off from all these possible sources of support. But the child whose parents are separating is going to be asking all of these questions. The child is going to be asking, where is Teddy going to be? Where is my dolly going to be? A dolly and a teddy can be very important transitional objects for a child. I've suggested a program which, when the child is handed over, there is in fact a handing over of the transitional object as well, in order to reduce stress on the child when the child is moving from one parent to another. The child is also going to undergo stress in later years, because the child is not experiencing what we would call normative couple relationships.
Yes.
The child may well have been exposed, not necessarily with the parents' desire to do so. The child certainly has picked up the distress and picked up the stress and picked up the arguments or the lack of warmth between the parents. The child is liable to go through the following thought process. Mommy and daddy loved each other. Now they don't love each other. Mommy and daddy say they love me. Maybe they won't love me anymore. This is a terrible thing for a child to have to go through. And therefore, the parents, if they are properly attuned to the needs of the child, they will work all these things out in advance before they inform the child that they're going to separate. And the process of informing the child also requires deep thought and professional advice if it's available. But they will be considering things like, what support systems does the child have outside the parents in order to help him or her get through? It may be a teacher, it may be a relative who is acceptable to the mother and the father and is not aligned with one of them. It may be the school counselor. In Israel, we have a Big Brother program for children of divorce, so that there will be an older, a young person, maybe a student, who's been through it and will be able to ask the questions, and a shoulder, if not to cry on, at least somebody who's experienced. These are all things that the parents have to think about before they make the decision to divorce, and certainly before they speak to the child, so that as soon as these questions arise, as soon as the child raises these questions, they will have answers available. Now, all of this assumes that the parents are able to get over their own anger and grief at the separation. And this cannot always be assumed. And the cases which come to court, the cases which end up with what we call high conflict, are those in which the parents have not got over their rage. They have not stopped blaming the other party for the failure of the dream of living happily ever after. Therefore, it's necessary that as soon as the case comes to the attention of the social services or of a psychologist or of the court, the parents be given the help that they need in order not only to get past their anger and grief, but also to develop the appropriate approach and the appropriate answers to the needs of the children. In Israel, as I may have mentioned, you cannot simply file your claim in court. You have to file in court an application for dispute resolution, which is referred to the social workers in the court, the family court social services. And there, the parties have to go through 3 sessions in which they're given information about the separation and divorce process and what it might do to the children. They're given recommendations to use alternative dispute resolution after they've been informed about the terrible damage that can be done by adversarial proceedings. including referrals to mediation and collaborative divorce and the other methods of dealing with cases without having a confrontation in court. And they're also helped to resolve immediate issues, like, for example, where and how the child is going to be with both of the parents, and where the handover is going to take place, and what times, and who's responsible for transporting the child. And it's been our experience, this process has been now going for 4 years, I think, that in many cases, by going at the early stage to these social services, many of these problems can be resolved by agreement. And then the agreement is brought to the court. There may even be a complete arrangement dealing with all issues, including where the children are going to be, including child support, including property division. But it's our experience that if you can help parents to reach agreement on some things, then they cease to regard the entire process as a battlefield, and they start thinking about resolving the other issues by agreement or by compromise and so on.
Yes, that seems like a really wonderful idea. Does it mean there's a whole process that takes place between the parents before the children are even notified of the intention to divorce?
That is the ideal situation. The ideal situation is that parents are, first of all, as I say, exposed to the damage that can be done if the separation and the divorce are not carried out, taking into account the needs of the child. And then, so the first stage, of course, is a public campaign of guidance for people. I even go so far as to say divorces might be avoided if we gave young men and young women who are considering relationships the elementary tools to assess whether the relationship is likely to succeed. There are issues where if their communication between them is not as it should be, or if they have different approaches to resolving problems, then we are considering a program for high school kids. So when they're taught about relationship education, they should also be taught about how to select a partner on the basis that this is going to be a long-term relationship, and if they're going to have children, then they're going to have a long-term relationship with the children. So there's a great deal to be done on the educational line. Then there needs to be, and this is something that we're working on at this moment in Israel, a document which will be given to couples or to individuals who are considering divorce, in which they'll be given a list of what things are liable to happen if they don't conduct their divorce properly. And we are at the moment considering whether the document should start with horror stories about what happens to kids when their parents get divorced badly, and then give them reassurance that this probably will not happen if you do things properly.
Yes, that would be effective.
We're consulting with the group I'm working with, consists of a highly experienced social worker, a mediator, a child psychologist, and me as a law sort of person. And we're going to be working on what the tone of this document is going to be. Whether we really want it to be scary and then let them down, or whether we don't want to frighten people off so they won't read past the first paragraph. These are issues which we're going to have to consider.
Yes, it's important that people realize the harsh reality of what actually goes on out there in divorces. So yeah, I think an element of shock would be effective. Yeah,
we know, for example, that a child who feels that there is no support at home will try and find support outside. That means that a boy may join a gang and find the gang leader to be a father figure, replacing the father. A girl may seek warmth in the wrong place with the wrong person, or the children, the youngsters, may look to alcohol or even drugs in order to relieve their pain. And these are outcomes that we see every day in the courts, in the juvenile courts, where there's a need for care and protection, or where children, youngsters get involved in crime, either as members of gangs or in order to finance a drug habit and so on.
Yes.
So these are the horror stories. There is another aspect, of course, and that is how you conduct the proceedings if the case comes to court. And here you need two or three things. First of all, you need that lawyers who handle these cases should be trained and should be sensitive to what's going on with the children. I've heard of cases all over the world where a mother, a wife comes and says she wants to get divorced, and the lawyer says, right, the first thing we're going to do is get an exclusion order against the husband.
Yeah.
That is barbaric. If there is no grounds for an exclusion order, if there are grounds, of course, if there's been abuse, if there's been violence, then you can certainly go for an exclusion order.
Yes.
But a lawyer who advises a client to get an exclusion order on no basis whatsoever, simply because it will afford some kind of tactical and strategic advantage in the proceedings, that lawyer should be disbarred.
Yes.
But it doesn't always reach that level. It may be a lawyer who just has no experience in family law and is helping his brother-in-law or helping a friend or a colleague at work. And family law is a complicated matter. The law itself and the procedures are complicated. But a lawyer who does not know about at least the basics of child development, the basics of psychology, the basics of dispute resolution, the lawyer who does not know what his client is going through is liable to run the case as a regular civil case, with the object to be to defeat the other party. That's the last thing that the children need. The children need the parents to come to some kind of equilibrium, not that one parent should be the custodial parent and the other should only have visitation. We're working on abolishing the terminology of custody and visitation. We're talking about parental responsibilities. I understand that's something like that is happening in South Africa and it's in other jurisdictions, and that's very welcome. It also requires, as well as lawyers who need to be trained and knowledgeable and sensitive, you also need judges who are appointed on the basis of their knowledge and experience in the field and take on family court because they want to, not simply because they're rotated through it in order to get ahead in the system. In Israel, the family court's law in 1995 says that in order to be a judge in the family court, there shall be a search for lawyers who have experience and knowledge in the field. And if you're appointed to the family court, you're only appointed to the family court if you want to be.
Yes.
And you know that you're going to be in that family court for 5 or 10 or 12 years until you get promoted, if you want to be promoted. So that there is a process of obtaining experience. If you're in a specialist family court, there are other judges you can consult with. There are compulsory seminars for judges every year in the family court. So if you have a specialist court with judges who are aware of the situation, then there's a greater possibility that matters will be handled in a way that does not aggravate the situation.
Just as
as I've said, one more thing, the family courts in Israel have a social services unit which is attached to the court, which means that if the parties need to be referred to social workers, that can be done in a matter of minutes The social services office is in the court building. So we can have a social worker consult with the parties or one of them. It's a matter of a phone call, and within 15, 20 minutes there'll be a social worker on the scene, and obviously the social workers will continue, as I said, in the process of the preliminary interviews, and they will also shall we say make the knives less sharp, make the process more one of consultation and collaboration than one of adversarial battle.
Yes. Just if I can just take a step back to the training of the legal professionals in your country, do they have any training in psychology, for example?
Certainly the judges do. Once in every few years, there will be a seminar which will be devoted to children, and they will have lectures from psychologists and from social workers and people who are experienced in the relevant fields, and those will be made available. In addition, because there is a social services unit attached to the court, in the court where I served, we would have meetings, the judges and the social workers and the psychologist, there's a psychologist who's attached to the unit, would meet from time to time and discuss issues, and they'd have a guest lecturer to talk about a particular issue, so that the court is considered to be, there is a system called therapeutic jurisprudence. I renamed it in an article I wrote that was published in the International Journal of Law and Psychiatry about judicial therapy.
Yes.
Because the decision that the judge makes, if it's informed by a knowledge of psychology and child development, the court itself can have a therapeutic role without losing its authority. So, for example, one of the things that I spoke about last time, I think, is where there is parental alienation, where the child is not seeing a parent. So a judge who is properly informed about these things will know how to analyze the situation, will know when it's necessary to get an expert involved, will be familiar also with the terminology that the expert psychologist or psychiatrist or social worker is using, will be familiar with the range of remedies or answers that can be given, and will give the force of a judgment or a decision to whatever therapeutic or social remedies are being suggested, and will enforce them.
Yes.
So that, as well as writing a good decision, taking account of all the therapeutic and other issues, the court also will exercise its authority to make sure that the orders are in fact being complied with. And as regards lawyers, so as I say, that there are lawyers who practice family law, that is their particular area, and there are unfortunately sharks, like there are in any ocean, and there are also lawyers who are more aware of their responsibilities to the children, even though the child may not be the client. And there are seminars being held. I've taken part in them in order to educate the lawyers as to the do's and don'ts, what they should be doing, and how they should be handling the case, and what they should avoid when they're conducting a case involving children.
Something of particular concern in South Africa also, and I'm sure in many parts of the world, is lawyers don't get trained in psychology. So what happens when a lawyer gets a client who is a person with malicious intentions, or a person with personality disorders, and is driving a case for alienation or false accusations and things? And if the lawyer is not trained to recognize or identify such behavior, they're going to act in good faith, believing that they are acting in the best interest of their client.
So this is an international issue, as you say, that lawyers who are trained only as lawyers and are not aware of all the surrounding issues are liable to make mistakes and are liable to mislead the court, without any evil intention.
Yes.
That can happen. Again, in a situation where the judges also have no training in the area or have no interest in the area. I've been to places around the world where a judge is forced to deal with family cases for 2 years or 1 year, and they don't want to. They may have a mashed up home life when they were kids or even going on.
Yes.
They find the whole issue of family law very threatening. I even heard of one judge who made sure that the family cases were in the afternoon so he could go to the pub at lunchtime and have 2 or 3 whiskeys in order to prepare himself for the family cases that were coming up, because he so much did not want to do it.
Yes.
So if we're up to me, I would have a compulsory course in law school or in university for law students to be exposed to what can happen if family cases go wrong. I would hope that then many of the lawyers would simply say, right, I don't want to do family law. Or if they get a family law case coming in the door of the office, they'll say, I'll refer you to the Mr. Bloggs down the road, who's a family expert. They won't take these cases because they simply won't, they would simply realize that they are not competent. And the same applies, of course, to social workers, social studies students. The same applies to teachers. We do a lot of work with teachers in order to alert teachers to the signs of distress in a child. And if that can be associated with parental strife, then the school counselors are being told that you need to call in the parents and say, look, little Johnny or little Janie is suffering, and you should be getting help with your parental strife. Same applies to medical students. They also need to be exposed. It doesn't need to be a long session. It could be 1 hour lecture a year. But if you simply expose them to that, then you've got a better chance of getting better results down the line when these people get qualified.
Yes, it seems like there are a lot of places where we can apply this education just to create an awareness of it. All around, like you said, at the schools it's important for, and also I think to a certain degree, obviously in an age-appropriate manner, children who are teenagers or adolescents might also be a benefit from being made aware of signs of alienation or something.
I've no doubt that should be that's the ideal. And let me just see if I can put up this slide now of the parents' promise.
That's a wonderful idea, actually.
Let me just see if I can get it up. Hold on. Share screen. Where are we?
It sometimes takes a moment.
It's not working. Hold on. Let me just get it up somewhere else. No, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. Let me just read it out to you.
All right, that'll be.
It's very short.
Maybe you can send it to me, and I can just share it with whoever listens to this interview. Yeah.
So the parent's promise reads as follows: Dear so and so, you put in the child's name. The parents say, whatever happens in our relationship with each other, we, the one parent's name, the other parent's name, promise to put your needs first by always recognizing that we are both your parents. You have a need for a relationship with each of us and your wider family. We will never make you choose between us. We promise to put your needs first by loving you and keeping you safe, while always being respectful to one another. As your parents, we will never hurt or tell lies about each other. We also promise that working together as a partnership to provide for you and to create the best conditions for you to thrive, even if we are living apart. that you can find that on the web. It's called The Parents' Promise.
Mm-hmm.
And I also want to tell you about another organization I'm working with.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Two Wishes, the Two Wishes Foundation.
Yes.
This is an international organization which was set up a bit over a year ago by basically three of us. David Curl, who has a very successful organization called For Kids' Sake in Australia,
Mm-hmm.
by Dr. Nick Child, who is a retired child psychiatrist from Edinburgh,
Yes.
whom you may know. And I was also involved in setting it up. And they have a fantastic website
Mm-hmm.
with a tremendous amount of information for everybody, basically.
Yes.
So it would be a good idea to look up the Two Wishes Foundation and look at their website. Because these are tremendous sources of information and of guidance and of how to. And the vision of Two Wishes, as we say, it's two wishes. Every child should have three wishes. A child whose parents separate, the first wish is that mom and dad should get back together again.
Mm-hmm.
But the second wish is, I want to get through this safe and sound and set up my own family.
Mm-hmm.
And the third wish is that no child should have to go through a terrible, messy, and obnoxious situation when the parents get divorced. So, we're programming now for publicity materials. We're programming now. I'm putting together a group of judges from different countries, including a judge from Cape Town, who will subscribe to these ideas. We are talking about a sort of paradigm as to how parents should get separated and divorced in the interests of their children. It'd be very good for you, Sinta, and anybody who's interested to look at that. And if you want to join the programs, that would also be a splendid idea.
That sounds wonderful. It's wonderful work that you've been doing, and I'll definitely look into it and follow up on that. But thank you so much for all that information and sharing your experience and your perspective on this. Very valuable. I really appreciate it.
I hope to help, and I'm at your service. Yes. If and when you should need.
Thank you. And I look forward
to have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.